Hi, everybody. Let's talk about how to negotiate your home purchase price. So they say that you can always refinance your mortgage later or at some other time, but that your purchase price is forever. So you want to make sure you get that right. And that's why it's so important that you negotiate your home purchase price. Janice, have you been through this before?
Oh, I have. Three houses so far. We've purchased, sold two. It is a process. It's definitely not an easy one.
Cool. So let's help everyone out here and go through a couple of tips so that hopefully when they negotiate their deals, they can get the best possible price. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing you need to ask is, why are they selling? Right. A lot of new buyers maybe don't feel comfortable asking about this, or feel like maybe it's invasive or something along those lines. This is a standard question you should be asking. And the listing agent, meaning the agent or realtor representing the seller, they expect to answer this. So get that information, right? Janice, why do you think this is such important information?
Well, so first of all, we've talked about this before. You've talked about it in your book. What's their time frame like? So if they're moving for work and they have to move fast, or they are moving because they're retired and they just have some time to play with, that could change your negotiations. Or if they have children that have to go to school and they have to start September 1st or whatever it is where you're at, you're talking about a very important timeline.
And if they don't really have a reason, you might be dealing with somebody who's just sort of testing the waters, dipping their toe in the market to see what their house is worth because they heard from, TV that the market is hot. And if they're not serious sellers, you might not want to waste your time on that one, yeah?
Correct. They're just, like you said, seeing what they could get, testing the waters. So
the next tactic for negotiating your home price is making sure you know the listing's history, okay? What are some examples of information you would like to know about the listing's history, Janice?
So interesting enough, out here in the burbs, we talk about a little bit about New York. If they list something and you see it's been on for one day, that's fantastic. But there's this little thing that some of the realtors do where they will list a house. It doesn't move for 9 months, I've seen. Yeah. And then they relist it.
Well, hold on. Before we get into that advanced technique, let's roll back.
Correct. Why was it listed for 9 months, right?
Right.
Is there a problem, right? That's a long time for a house to be on a market, especially when it's a really hot market. So you're asking, why? Why was it on there for that long?
Yeah. So you're definitely jumping right into the advanced explanation of that. Let's roll it back for the beginners. So if a listing has just been put on the market, meaning today is the first day or first week that it's been offered for sale, think about it for a moment from the seller's perspective. They don't know if your offer is a good one or a bad one yet because they haven't received multiple offers, right? They only have your one offer, maybe, possibly. Whereas if it's been on the market, they've been showing every weekend for weeks or months, and yours is the first offer that came in, that might bode well for you.
A little different. Correct. At that point, they're exhausted. I can tell you from experience of 26 showings and 4 open houses with 4 little kids. Yeah. Yes. I would have taken anything at that point.
There you go. That's exactly the mentality that that a seller would take or would embrace probably. And you also need to realize, okay, so if it's been on for a long time, but there have been multiple offers, what does that tell you about the sellers, right? If there's been multiple offers over a long period of time, but they haven't closed any deals yet. Right?
It might mean for more. What are they looking for?
They're super dug in on their price.
Flag. Mm-hmm. Correct. It's those red flags we talk about, like how long has it been on? What are they waiting for? What's going on?
And then now to jump ahead to what you were mentioning, which is a great point, because some sellers agents are aware of this sort of stigma of having a listing that's been sitting out there for weeks or more likely months. There's a lot of relisting that happens. You got to keep an eye out for that. Can you explain what that means, Janice?
So now, talking about that now, so let's say it's been on for 9 months. There's some sort of, maybe there's a problem. There's just something. And the realtor will say, well, this doesn't look great. So they take it off the market, whether that's for a day, 2 days, what have you, and relist it. Now it's like, if you have all these apps now, they ping when a new house comes on the market. Now you've got the same house, 9 months, there's an issue, pings again, and says, oh, new house.
So from the buyer's perspective, when you're doing your searches, right, you're clicking in all your parameters on all these awesome new websites, which make it so much easier than when we were looking, when it was like newspapers.
Oh my goodness, yes.
But one of the metrics that they'll show you the price and the address and the pictures, but they'll show days on the market, right?
Correct.
And if that number is like over 100 days,
yeah.
Obviously the sellers, for the reasons we talked about, the seller's broker would want that to reset back to zero or a much lower number.
Correct.
And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about relisting.
Correct.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're not getting away with it anymore, because if you look at these apps or online, it'll give you a history of price reductions.
Yep.
Even though it's been relisted, it'll say, well, it just got off the listing for 100 days. So you really want to look, but your realtor will tell you that if you have one that is really looking out for your interests.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's a great point. Just look at the whole history of the unit so that you can see that. Very good. Very good.
Correct.
All right.
Correct.
So the third tip for how to negotiate your home price: make sure you know the market. Okay. So I can't believe I'm saying this, but I've seen this so many times. Some people believe that the rule of thumb is to always, just without regard to circumstances or situation, just always flat out, I'm always offering 10% below asking price because I always get good deals. I mean, that's very frustrating when I hear that.
It is. But, I actually think that goes back to what you were just saying about the old school days where you're reading from a newspaper and you see the listing price, and you may not have all those research tools available to you where you can say, well, the reasonable price for this house is blank.
Yep.
I remember, go back way back when, where it was, I'm not paying that amount just because they said it, but we're getting into a different time where that's not acceptable.
There's just so much data now, and there are so many different sellers with different circumstances. There are plenty of situations where the sellers put it on the market at a very good price because they're motivated to sell. And if you in turn come in and say, well, I always offer 10% less just as my starting point, that can be kind of insulting and demonstrating that you don't know the market,
Correct. And again, that goes back to, you have a realtor that's going to know your market and hopefully dissuade you from coming in so low.
Yeah. It's also important to know the market because on the flip side of things, many sellers have unrealistic expectations, right?
Yes.
I mean, I understand. You've lived in this home, you've raised your kids, you love it, you think this neighborhood is the best, you think the school is the best, you love that the supermarket's right here. Why wouldn't you expect this pie in the sky number for your awesome home that you don't even want to leave that much? If you could, you stay here for, I'm rambling on and on, but
no, but it's true. It's very, very true. We saw that when we were looking for a house. There was one that was it was very, very lovely, but they were almost $100,000 over the market in our one development. It sat there for almost a year and a half when everything else would sell maybe 2-3 days.
Wow.
So it was interesting. I have seen that, and it was just, we came in at a reasonable offer. They said, nope, we can wait. And they did.
And they were probably one of those guys who had their listing on for like 100, 200, 300 days. Yeah.
Yes. But they kept relisting. We'd get the ping that says, oh, there's a new house. Yes. But that is an unreasonably high listing.
Sure. So let's help them understand. We're going to help you understand, how do you know what's reasonable or unreasonable? I'll go into it for the city because it's actually not easy, but there's a lot of data in this city, so that's really great. And maybe, Janice, you can talk about more of the suburban areas afterwards. So in the city, what you want to do is you want to get what are called comparables, right? Meaning if a very similar unit sold for this price in a very recent time frame, in the past 3 months or so, that's probably where your price is going to be, somewhere in that ballpark. Okay, that's what the market is for your type of unit, right? Because we're talking about apartments, condos, co-ops.
Correct.
So what's important to know is you want to look at recently sold numbers. Do not compare to current listing numbers. Current listing numbers are what optimistic sellers are hoping to get.
Correct. We just talked about that.
Exactly. Recent sales is what people actually, the amount at which people actually handed over their money or signed over their mortgage. That's the important number, not the pie in the sky dreams.
Correct. Not the ones throwing it all off. Yes.
So the city is really great because, you know, you could live on, I'm just going to pick out some if you live in, or if you're interested in unit 10A in a building, right, which is a 2-bedroom or whatever, you might be able to find out that within the past 3 to 6 months, 9A, 12A, and 7A all sold for this price, this price, this price. And you can make some adjustments because, you know, the higher floors have a nicer view or the lower floors had a granite countertop. Maybe, you know, make those adjustments, but you'll have a really strong sense of what did I say, 10A should be worth.
Yes, 10A. Yes.
So, but how is it in the suburbs? I know you won't have that sort of unit by unit comparison, but how would you approach it there?
No, so it's so similar. So for example, when we were looking, we needed one development because it was the school that they were in. It was, and I'm using just my own.
Sure.
But they're cookie cutter houses. So it's similar to being in a cooperative building. It may not be exactly the same, but they all look the same. They have relatively the same features. They might be a little bigger, a little smaller. But when you have I say average price, sale price of, let's say, you know, $300,000. And then you've got one sitting over there, like I said before, for $425,000. That's the same cookie cutter house. You know, no pool, no bells, no whistles. That's kind of what you start looking at. But it is the same. I mean, if you're looking at a development and they're all relatively the same size, and you got one that's real high, you kind of got to look at that. And you said not. I'm probably moving ahead here, but you can look a lot online. And I don't know if you ever Google right? Yeah. Sometimes I Google our house, and you have one site that says one price, which I'm like, oh, I like that site. And you got another one that's, you know, 50,000 less. That's not really a true valuation. It can complicate things, I think. So it's helpful, but
yeah, don't rely even a little bit on the online estimates. I think Zillow has something called a Zestimate. It can give you a ballpark figure, like within $500,000, maybe. But I mean, okay, for example, there's a great anecdote that the CEO or founder of Zillow actually, you know, he was being interviewed, and the interviewer asked him to check the value of his own home, right? Oh boy. And it was way off. And, you know, he just kind of acknowledged, look, this is a guiding tool. It is not meant to give you an idea of true valuation in any sense of the word, but just a bandwidth where you might fall. Yes. And to that extent, yes, it's useful for that, to know if it's a trailer home or a mansion. You know, you'll be able to tell that difference.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. And if you see a Zillow or a Zestimate, they call it, at $500,000, when every other cookie cutter is going for $300,000. Yeah. You got to look at, like you said, you look at the sales that happened recently, and those are the actual sales.
Yep. Cool. All right. Moving on to the fourth home negotiation tip. Keep your cards close. And this is like a poker reference, I guess, or blackjack. Yes, I don't really gamble, so
all of them where you have to just, you know, keep your poker face, they call it.
And you don't want to reveal too much. You want to keep your cards close to the chest. You don't want to come off as sneaky, but you don't want to give out information unnecessarily. And we have a great example of that. You don't want to show that you're pre-approved for so much more than what you're offering. Let's give an example. So let's say you're interested in a house that's listed for $800,000, and you put in an offer for $750,000, and it's something that you guys are working towards coming to a final number. And as part of that process, usually, to show that you're serious, you send the sellers proof of funds, meaning that you have the down payment in your bank account, and you also send them your pre-approval letter from the bank or mortgage lender, showing that, yes, there is a bank, you've gone through the process, you're a serious borrower, and you've gone through the steps to show that you're approved to borrow. But there have been instances where, you know, to flex your credit muscles, you get the pre-approval for like $1.5 million or something, just because you can prove that you know that's how much you could borrow if you wanted to. Right.
Right.
If you send that pre-approval letter to the guy, to the seller, who's asking for $800 and you're offering $750, just I don't know, how do you think they're going to feel about that?
Oh, like seriously, you can't give me the other $50,000 because you can.
You're really pre-approved for double what you're offering.
Yeah, right. Come on, what's the other 50 that I was asking for originally? Right.
So that might sound a little funny or silly, but that's just one example of when you want to keep some information, you know, to yourself.
Right. Right. And I believe that they can write the pre-approval letter for what you're asking if you talk to the bank. I think that's what we did. I mean, you don't want to go in and say, haha, look what I can do, which feels good. But then they say, haha, why can't you pay the rest of the money for this?
Yeah.
Especially if you're in like a negotiation type thing where you're going back with offers, counter offers, and all that. I just want to watch.
All right. I mean, so we talk about some of these issues in my book, How to Buy Your Perfect First Home, available on Amazon. But yeah, it's also fun to dig into some of the examples here when we talk on our podcast. Yeah, Janice?
Absolutely. Yes, in your book, it's actually a really good guide to help those. You say it's for first-time home buyers, but I respectfully disagree. I think it's actually for buyers even the second and third time, because I remember between my first and third, you forget that you need it, like this pre-approval letter. That's a great example of, oh, yeah, that's right. So it's just a great quick read guide of give you a couple extra tools before you start out this process.
Oh, thank you. Available on Amazon. Pick it up if you're in the process. And now we'll move on to the last negotiating tip for home buyers. And the tip is, don't just negotiate based on purchase price. Or, excuse me, don't just negotiate purchase price. There are other ways to meet in the middle. Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, psychologically, in any negotiation, I mean, there tends to be a point where you're going to just dig in a little bit, maybe out of fatigue or frustration. And not just you, the other side as well. I mean, that just happens. It's human nature.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So you might say, I'm not going a penny over $750,000. And the seller, for whatever reasons, similar to your own reasons, well, I'm not going a penny below $800,000. So how about that, right?
Well, that's a stalemate now, isn't it? Yeah.
That's kind of a big gap, so I regret using that example. But
no, but I know what you mean. Like if you have two people that want to make it work and you are steadfast, how are you going to meet in the middle?
So there's a couple of other ways to close the gap. Number one, instead of talking about the purchase price, which might have some sort of psychological anchor in the seller's mind, ask them to cover some of your closing costs, right? And in terms of absolute dollars, it might be the exact same thing, but it just feels different. Where if the seller knew, hey, let's say the seller bought it for $400,000, 20 years ago, and is now trying to sell it for exactly double, right? There's just, people have these reasons, right? Like it doesn't matter double or not.
They just have that number in their head. That's my number.
So as long as they can sort of feel like I got double, even if effectively they're still only getting $750 because they paid your closing costs and whatnot. That probably, by the way, $50,000 would be a lot for closing costs. I'm just using.
Example would be more like what, $750 to $760, or
yes.
You're so close, but you're standing, strong, and you're right. Look for seller assist, or your realtor is going to help you come to that without saying, well, the purchase price.
Another example. Yeah, speaking of the realtor, another great way to close the gap is to have one or both of the realtors cut their commission. So the realtor's commissions on most deals is going to be between 5 and 6% of the total purchase price of the property. If they knock off even 1% or 1.5%, divided between the two realtors, that can be, depending on the purchase price, like tens of thousands of dollars that is back in the mix. Yeah.
Correct. And if they want the deal to go through, it's something they would consider and really look into.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of folks don't want to, take food off their broker's table or something along those lines. But you know what? If the deal doesn't close, there's nothing for anybody.
Correct. If that's what it takes, and and I've seen this in real life. If that's what it takes to close the deal, and it means a 0.5% for them, they're going to wait. It's that cost benefit analysis. They're going to do it. It's a no-brainer sometimes, depending on the situation, and it works. And especially if you have a realtor who is both selling your home and helping you buy the one you're moving into. It's we purchased and bought at the same day. So we had one realtor for that, and they did exactly what you're saying. And
again, like you said, it makes total sense for them to earn 4 or 5% of two deals versus 0% of no deals.
Correct. Right. It makes sense to me. I mean, if you told me to drop it down a couple of pennies and it would be done, getting paid is better than not getting paid.
Okay, cool. Those are the 5 tips of how to negotiate your home purchase price. Hope you found them helpful. Check out the book on Amazon. And otherwise, thank you, Janice. Talk to you again next time, yeah?
Talk to you soon, Anthony.
Take care.
Bye-bye.